everyone, it's Audrey.
It's Adeline.
Welcome to our podcast,
Unlikely Neighbors!
Yay! Today, we actually are going to be interviewing multiple people, which is quite exciting. Adeline had an incredible idea of asking friends who live in different countries and how their governments are responding to the outbreak. So we're going to be just hearing from different people. This is all done over Zoom calls, so it might sound a bit different than it has in the previous week, but we hope that you guys still feel connected to these people as you're listening.
I think listening to all of these different stories from around the world really brought a lot of memories back for me and also Audrey, because Hong Kong is at a much better place right now in terms of our COVID numbers. And so it's easy to forget like the large scale of this pandemic and how, you can be very focused on what is happening in your current city. Yeah, I think it was just a good way for us to gain perspective as well and really check in with our friends from around the world. It was also really, really exciting and really fun to have some of my close friends be part of this as well, even from so far away, and for Audrey to get to meet them as well, because this is her first time meeting them. So that was all really fun, and we really hope that you enjoy the episode and bear with us for all the sound, potential sound quality issues, but we hope that, you still enjoy it.
Hi, Sophia. Thanks so much for being a part of our podcast. Yeah, your first interview that is long distance.
So Sophia and I actually know each other from college, and we knew each other from freshman orientation because we met as international students and bonded over liking Chelsea, the football team, which we both don't even like. And then we just grew our friendship over the 4 years and actually ended up living together our senior year. Even though after graduation, we met each other maybe like 2 or 3 times since graduating, which is a pretty good record, I would say. We were supposed to meet again in March, but because of the COVID-19 situation, we had to cancel that trip. Thank you so much, Sophia, for coming on the podcast.
So, Sophia, what country are you currently living in? When did you start living there? And are you living there as an expat or a local?
I am currently living in Singapore, and I am here because I moved here in 2018. I would consider myself a local because I spent most of my life here, but I did move away when I was younger and then came back to Singapore when I was in high school and then went to the States for college. I guess most people wouldn't consider me like a true local, and my accent doesn't help, but my family's here and Singapore will always kind of feel like home.
So what is the situation with Corona in your city right now?
Right now, we're close to like 24,000 cases. The majority of these cases are all in the not all, but most of them are in the dormitories where the migrant workers are living. And they're living in really close proximity and not the most ideal circumstances. So most of the spread is happening there. But outside of the dormitories, there's far fewer cases, and it seems to be lessening. So we're on this thing called a circuit breaker, which essentially just means everyone is supposed to stay at home except for those working in essential services. I mean, we can go out and get groceries and necessities and take away food and stuff like that. Also, just side note, please be kind to your delivery drivers. I was getting a takeaway and it was like a self-pickup, and so I was waiting there to pick up, and I waited over an hour to pick up. I was getting so impatient, but obviously I was trying to be patient, but there were all of these delivery drivers that were there who were just like waiting, and it's not even food for them. And I overheard a guy saying he waited like 2.5 hours for one order.
Wow.
And the customer was just like really rude and unkind to him. I mean, I was impatient waiting for my food that I was going to get and eat. Okay, this has nothing to do with.
No, but that's good to know.
That's good.
Yeah, I'm sure lots of people are ordering food now as well. So this is like a good PSA for everyone to treat your delivery drivers well.
Are you guys still able to eat out at restaurants?
No. So restaurants are either closed, or if they're open, it's only like delivery or takeaway.
So how do you feel like people are responding like emotionally and mentally to what's happening? Like there are probably like rules that are being implemented and people following, but like what's the community like? What's their interaction and engagement like on like a individual personal level?
I mean, technically we're supposed to stay at home, and I tend to feel the need to follow rules too strictly maybe. And so I really haven't gone out except for like necessities, but it's definitely interesting because like yesterday when I went to pick up food for Mother's Day, day, there was so many people, and like definitely there was like very limited social distancing. But then again, it was like a special occasion, so I don't know if that had anything to do with it. I don't know. I guess everyone is kind of responding to it differently, and a lot of people are exercising a lot more outside. So we have to wear masks when we go out, but the exception is if you're running or like doing more strenuous exercise, you don't have to wear your mask. And so it seems like a lot more people are running than usual.
Are they actually running, or do you catch them like walking without a mask in
most of them
gear?
are genuinely running, but there's a couple that are just like kind of just walking.
I mean, maybe you guys will be really fit like after this whole situation.
Oh, yeah.
But it also makes sense at the same time because everyone's shut in, and I think it's a really hard time for a lot of people. And then there's a lot of families where they don't have enough, or like even just like families with children who have special needs. This is a really difficult time. Also for like divorced families, we're not allowed to gather with anybody outside your immediate household. So many complexities that you don't realize.
Yeah, I definitely didn't think about a lot of that as well. You talked about, how people are doing in Singapore, but how do you think you have taken this whole corona situation?
So I feel like my life has been all over the place the last few months or maybe even year. And I was actually in Korea when the cases there spiked up. So my friend and I, we were figuring out like, do we leave now or do we stay? Like, what do we do? So we ended up like leaving to Malaysia, staying with her family, and then it just went crazy. And so it almost felt like I was like escaping different countries that had like all these different cases that were rising, and then like the government was like locking down. So like after we left Korea, Malaysia was like kind of on a lockdown, and then when we left Malaysia to come to Singapore, then Malaysia closed its borders, which is crazy.
Yeah.
I haven't been very worried or like too anxious about it.
Mm-hmm.
I recognize that it's a pandemic and it's taking away a lot of lives, and it is a really like it's affecting people on different levels.
Well, how do you think it's changed your lifestyle, or like how do you think it's affected your life?
I feel like people keep saying, oh, being at home, stuck at home is like an introvert's dream. But I'm an introvert, and it's nice that you can stay home and like there's no pressure to go out or whatever because you basically can't. But at the same time, I feel like this time is a lot more socially taxing for me than on a normal basis when I can go out and see people, because now it's like Zoom call, like FaceTime. And I hate phone calls and video calls.
So this is like
it's like
your worst
It's like
nightmare.
torture for her.
yeah.
Thanks for agreeing to be on our podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much. We owe you a big one.
Obviously, I have to do it because you have to keep relationships and friendships, but
It's stretching you in a different way than what you expected. So like maybe you expected chill time, but really it's more draining than you anticipated.
I'd say maybe just the like social part is draining, but other than that, it's really not bad.
I mean, I agree. I was telling Audrey and some other people the other day that like I actually don't like phone calls and video calls. But then you obviously have to do it because you want to connect with people still, but it's just like another thing. I don't know. And
Exactly.
It's also such a privilege that we actually have friends or family that we can video call. So nothing to complain about.
Or even having the tools to do that. Yeah.
That's true.
So are there any new habits or interesting things you're learning at the moment in the midst of this?
I get bored really easily. So basically, I've always been really good at entertaining myself and finding ways to engage myself.
You're also an only child, so you had to play with yourself for a long time.
Exactly.
Oh, I was wondering that. I feel like a lot of like single children say that.
I'm really good at that. But I love using my hands. So I've been sewing some, drawing, painting, making random things, making a mess. I've been exercising, reading a lot.
So what are you looking forward to the most after all this is over?
Honestly, I just miss spending time face to face with my friends and my family. We just see so much more injustice and inequality like more evidently during this time, not just in Singapore, but also like just everywhere in the world. You see it on the news all the time, and it's heartbreaking. But at the same time, I also feel like there's so much goodness in humans that is on display now too. So I just hope that people will continue to be heartbroken and convicted to continue to love those around us better, even when all of this like craziness is over.
I love that. Is there anything that you've taken away or like learned? Like I love that you touched on how we can all kind of like be more aware of, and I feel like this also brings to light the people that are vulnerable in our communities, but maybe what's something that you've personally taken away from this time? Like maybe something you've learned?
Yeah, just being reminded of how much I have and how much I have to be grateful for, and whether it's like small things or big things, and seeing that God is in control. I think the biggest takeaway is just like he does turn bad things for good.
Thanks so much, Sophia, for joining us today and sharing about your experience with COVID-19 in Singapore. So our next guest is Michael, and Michael and I met in college as well. I don't really remember how we met exactly, but we lived on the same floor freshman year. My first memory of Michael is when he and another friend came and messed up my bed and left me annoying little messages hidden around my bed, and I was still like finding those messages throughout the whole week. So that just about sums up Michael. Very annoying. Just kidding. Despite how... Wait, I'm not done. I'm trying to sell you on your good.
He's like, you're just gonna roast me on this.
Despite Michael's love to annoy his friends, he's very adventurous, has a big heart, and is always willing to help someone if they were in need. And he's also a great cook as well, so we're always very, very well fed. Michael grew up in Virginia and is now working in Northern California in the U.S. So thank you, Michael, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Can you introduce yourself to the rest of our podcast listeners?
Yeah, so I'm Michael. I grew up here in Virginia. After college, I left the States to live in China for a few years, where I worked in tourism, selling tour packages to rich people and teaching them how to cook Chinese food. And then
the most iconic foreigner package.
Although, I will say that we tried really, really hard to make people think deeply about sort of rural Chinese culture. So it is super, super typical in that sense. But I tried. And then after that, I did a little quick master's program in Beijing. I'm in my second year, but I'm not doing it from Beijing. My second year just solely consists of writing my thesis, and I'm doing that from home.
I thought you were done.
You and me both.
What is your thesis about?
Yeah.
It's about return migration, which is this phenomena of rural migrants who move to the cities and then move back into their hometown.
What country in particular?
The same community that I worked in tourism in Yunnan. So most of them left to go to Kunming or Chengdu, and then a lot of them have started to come back. So it's kind of this new, interesting migration pattern. But it's really, dull and dry and academic and boring.
So you just said it's interesting.
It's interesting. It's interesting to people. It's interesting to people who have nothing better to do with their time than think about these things.
Okay, yeah.
So you.
Exactly.
So maybe just explain what country or state you're currently living in. When did you start living there? And are you living there as an expat or a local?
So I moved to Oakland, California, which for everyone who doesn't know is right next to San Francisco. It's all part of the greater Bay Area. I moved here last August, so I'm kind of a transplant. Not an expat, nor a local. So kind of in between.
How would you define yourself then?
A very eager transplant.
I'm dead. He's always a very eager transplant, no matter where he's transplanted. So
you're very used to moving like within the States. So it's not like this is like your hometown area, but you're very comfortable moving to different places.
Yeah. I mean, the last 4 years, this would be my fourth home. So I've moved every year. So my girlfriend just got into medical school.
Which
in
one?
DC. Yeah, she's most likely going to Georgetown next year.
She's also really smart.
She's smarter than me, and she listens to this podcast, so which means I have to pretend to be smart so she won't be embarrassed of me later.
What is the situation like in your city now in terms of COVID-19, and how is the government, if you're comfortable with explaining, how is the government approaching this?
Yeah, so Oakland is interesting. It was the first region in the country to implement a shelter-in-place order, which means that literally for 8 weeks, we've been kind of self-quarantining, although we can leave for the exceptions of essential businesses and work and stuff like that. So the first few days, actually, I was still going to work because my work is in legal aid. And basically, if we don't do our jobs, people get evicted, they get on the streets. And more people on the streets means the pandemic spreads faster, right? But we quickly transitioned into sort of over the phone intakes. So that was a really quick transition for us. And I stopped going into work. But I mean, the only time I go out now is for exercise, grocery shopping, and then I picked up a side hustle of delivering food on my bike. I actually do two companies because
Wow.
you know, you got to be a player in the game. So I'm doing DoorDash and Postmates. Postmates
Okay, nice.
tips better. DoorDash is more popular, so I get more orders. But I figured, why would I pay for a gym, especially because they're all closed now, when I could get paid to ride my
That's
bike?
actually very good
very
logic.
smart,
Oh
yeah.
my gosh.
I bike probably like 20 km a day. So, anyways, back to the COVID question, which is to say, it's been 8 weeks. I just counted that out before we got on this call, but I was like, 8 weeks. That's wild. And as a result, the number of cases here really isn't nearly as bad as it has been in a lot of other places in the country. We have a couple thousand in the area. But again, I mean, the population density in the Bay Area and just like the level of sort of inflow from other parts of the world and other states and stuff like that, you would expect the cases to be a lot higher, closer to the New York numbers probably, just given how populous the state is. But I think because of the really aggressive measures in the beginning, that has helped. But the problem, I think, overall is that because not everyone is taking it so seriously, and the cases are still spreading, but then we're still trying to take it kind of seriously. So it's literally been 8 weeks of not being able to see friends. That has been really starting to get on people's nerves. And so now, like, even though it hasn't really changed, we're still sheltering in place. People have started to kind of gather just because they can't take it anymore. So it's kind of tough.
I feel like that is similar to Hong Kong because we took it very seriously from the beginning and then no one else around the world was taking it seriously. So I think we were really frustrated by that as well. But why do you think California or your area took it so seriously in the beginning versus other?
That's a hard question to answer. I do think the Bay Area in particular, the reputation of the Bay has always been this sort of like science and tech hub, right? And so I think maybe part of that makes the leaders here much like a little bit more attentive to science than the rest of the country. Maybe the other thing that I think is kind of funny and interesting is that like the Bay Area has been so historically opposed to our current president Trump that maybe just the fact that he was like denying this is a big deal, they were like, wait, I think you're not right. And so let's investigate this further. And then they realized, oh crap, it actually is a big deal.
Actually, I feel like you kind of answered the second question I had, but if you want to elaborate, you can. How do you feel like your community, either personal community, or like your neighborhood, the town you live in, how have they responded to this?
So I'll talk, I guess, on a few levels. The first one is like the neighborhood I live in, which is Chinatown in Oakland. In the very beginning, in like February, when we were just starting to hear about this, it feels like Chinatown's getting a little bit quieter. People are being a little bit more careful. The Chinese people around here are starting to wear masks. And you started to hear these stories of like anti-Asian racism as well. So one of the professors who actually goes to my church, he started this sort of Asian American hate crime sort of reporting network. To date, in the last 2 or 3 months, they've received over 1,900 reports.
Wow.
And it's just like people who have found this website somehow, And so we felt that a little bit here in Oakland, Chinatown, and on BART. When I was still going into work, I definitely would feel a little bit uncomfortable. People would be talking very openly about coronavirus. And I remember this one time I had been kind of suspicious of I was like, how many people really believe these sort of conspiracy theories about them originating in some sort of virus lab in Wuhan until I saw this sort of middle-aged white guy talking to his friend. He looked like the banker type, and he was going to work and he was talking about how scared he was of every Chinese person. And I was just like, what?
Oh, no.
So we definitely have felt a little bit of tension in the air. But the Bay Area is pretty Asian heavy. In some ways, you feel a little bit safer because there's a lot of Asians. But in other ways, it's like there's more people to discriminate against. My church community has been really interesting during this time. We do really interactive Zoom services. Where we're always people are always trolling each other in the comments. And in fact, there are some people that I talk to more on Zoom than I talk to in person at church. Of course, the other part is really difficult for our community is that we have a number of low income or older or even unhoused or homeless folks who come to our church regularly, and they don't have access to Zoom. And so that's been really
Yeah.
it's so integral to our church in particular to sort of embracing these sort of communities that are traditionally sort of left aside. And so it's been really tough for us to figure out, how do we still create community for them when they can't get on Zoom?
Wow. These are things that like you don't really think about.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you dealing with the coronavirus situation? Like you briefly mentioned about your biking, your new side hustle. So like what else have you been doing?
One thing I have found is actually I'm a lot more sort of attentive to how I cook now. Before it was sort of like rush home after I work and it's like I'm tired and I just want to whip something together as quick as possible. Now I literally almost never spend less than 2 hours on dinner.
Wow.
It's ridiculous.
I told you he's good at cooking.
Wow.
Well, 2 hours doesn't mean I'm good at cooking. It could mean that
It's like extra slow. You already kind of hinted at this, but on a personal level, how do you feel like COVID has affected you, either like mentally or like, I mean, you mentioned a bit in your routines, but maybe just specifically focusing on you?
I will say that like it's been this crazy sort of roller coaster of emotions. I mean, we live in a very nice 1-bedroom apartment. It's pretty spacious, but it is 3 people in a 1-bedroom apartment, and we are seeing each other 24/7. All of us feel like, man, I don't have anywhere for personal space. And that's part of the reason why I do the delivery thing, is like it's my 1 or 2 hours of the day where I'm just on my bicycle and we can just give each other some space, and it's kind of intentional in that way. I feel like I've learned so much more about like my impatience and also like the sort of things that rub each other the wrong way in our little makeshift family, the COVID family here.
Yeah.
It's been really terrible in the sense that like we've had a lot of arguments, a lot of disagreements, but then after we sort of push through that, it's like, okay, well then how can I be more accepting of your quirks, and then how can I also hold back my judgment during, while we're living together?
Yeah, no, that's really good. I think that's like an act of maturity as well, like even during this time to be able to continue to stay together, especially with like girlfriend, brother, all of those family dynamics is like always difficult. But I mean, I heard that, which is really sad, but I think the number of divorces that are filed is like really high during this time. So I think it's definitely something that's nice that you're able to like practice intentional community. What Ethan has set you up for.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
What are you looking forward to the most after this season is over?
It's going to sound kind of like a boring answer, but definitely like having friends over and going to friends' places. Just like literally being able to see friends in person, have like a beer with a friend and like talk about stupid stuff and play board games together. I realize that's kind of what makes life interesting. For example, we've played all the card games we know so many times now. I think we need to play almost every single night, like some sort of game, right? In the last 2 weeks, we haven't played almost anything just because we're so bored. And we're also so like stubborn and unwilling to learn new stuff, waiting for our friends to come back into our lives.
What do you feel like your biggest takeaway is, or like the biggest lesson you've learned?
I think it's to pay attention to people around me. I find that like literally spending so much time with these people has made me much more attuned to sort of their different moods and their different needs, and my own needs as well. And it also it makes me really appreciate every time we go out. Just yesterday we went out, we were just like looking at the clouds and sitting there and listening to music. And it's such a stupid, like small sort of like moment, but I was like so satified just to be able to be like, wow, look at those clouds. Be able to sit outside.
I want to tear up. That's so sad. Because like I remember that like experience and that feeling for myself, escaping for a little bit and just like, I don't know, you just really cherished all these little moments now. And
like something so normal has so much meaning.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
It never did before. It catches you off guard. Almost.
Yeah. Another thing that was interesting when you mentioned that, because I think a lot of people, even if they're stuck together during this time, like they might not learn anything new about who they're living with, like I think the fact that you guys were so intentional about getting to know each other on a different level, like I'm sure that took a lot of work as well. And I think that's definitely really cool to hear, because I think it's very easy to just shut off, like, okay, I'm just going to go to my little corner. If you guys don't have a room, go to my little corner and watch shows, like, drown my sorrows, like waste away the hours. But I think it's cool that you guys are intentionally trying to learn about each other, even despite like potential arguments.
Yeah, you make it sound much more noble than it actually was, but I appreciate that. I do. I think you're right. Like, if we had 3 bedrooms, we probably wouldn't have as much of this. But I think because we're sort of forced into this small space, just the intensity of our, what we're arguing about or what we're thinking through has really made us be like, okay, we can't continue like that. We have to, something has to give. We have we have to learn to be more gentle with each other somehow.
Yeah. It's like avoidance can't exist in an environment where you have to like face each other pretty much. Where I feel like people with 3 rooms or like more, you can just like hide and run away.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, Michael. We're so glad that we got to call you today. It was super good meeting you.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to hear from you guys. Can I do the outro?
Yeah. Go
Yeah, sure.
Bada 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 boom. Thanks everyone for listening to Unlikely Neighbors, hosted by your neighbor, Adeline Ng, and your other neighbor, Audrey Dow, both in the running for the most annoying people in Hong Kong.
You clearly haven't listened to any of our episodes because that's not even our soundtrack.
Bada 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 boom.
So our final guest for our episode is Jenny. And Jenny and I also met in college and we became friends like sophomore year. We were basically adventure buddies all throughout college.
Yeah.
Like if I wanted someone to do something really like spontaneous, I knew that if I called Jenny, she would definitely say yes. One very significant memory I remember is really dumb, but one weekend we literally stayed at Jenny's apartment all weekend and finished an entire Korean drama, and we literally did not leave the apartment at all, and we even ordered bubble tea and other food.
Yeah.
We didn't want to do anything else.
We didn't leave the sofa. We were glued to that couch for like the whole weekend.
Yeah. Like Jenny's roommates would come in, like different people would come in, they're like, oh, you're still here? But thank you so much, Jenny, for joining us. I'm so glad to have you here with us.
I'm so honored.
So if you don't mind just giving us an introduction about yourself, what are you doing post-grad? What country are you living in? And when did you start living there?
I live in Seoul, South Korea. I was born and raised in Seoul, but I moved back here after college and started working in finance. I quit my job like last month. Yay! And I'm probably going to be moving to the state hopefully in August.
Wow.
And hopefully I'm going to be married in November. I'm engaged.
Just threw that in.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. Yeah. I had to slide that in there.
So how would you explain what the COVID situation is like in your city? How would you say the government is responding to it right now?
Okay, so we had a really big spike like in February, and I think the Korean government did a really good job at flattening the curve. By the end of March, we were only having like somewhere in the range between like 0 to 20 cases daily. I think like what they did was they tested a lot of people daily. It was a lot cheaper to get tested than in like other countries. They also tracked all the people who were flying in, and they made sure that they were doing 2 weeks of self-quarantine. So they did a really good job at testing everyone. Curve really flattened because everyone was like stocking up and like buying like huge quantities of masks. They divided the Korean population into 5. So depending on your birth year, you could buy either on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday, Friday.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, and they limited the number of masks you can buy. There was like less lines. People who really needed them could get them.
Mm-hmm.
That was really good. But recently, actually, there was an outbreak. So what happened was, Itaewon is a city in Seoul where there's a lot of clubs and bars and a lot of expats come and go. And the outbreak started there in a gay club. And this was really tricky because there's still like a lot of stigma against the LGBTQ community in Korea. A lot of these people, because they didn't want that publicity, they were refusing to get tested.
Oh no.
Yeah, and they were like roaming about. So like it spread, and I heard like it's been spreading more and more. I think we just have to be really cautious right now. So that's the situation right now. I heard like It's been spreading through like karaoke rooms, and there's a lot of hostility and homophobic words and actions against this community right now. So far, like the government's been dealing with it pretty well. The government's been sending out messages, one of those like emergency alerts, saying like don't be afraid of publicity or like that your information is going to be exposed, but like come get tested. We are willing to keep that confidential. So the government's really trying to deal with it.
Oh, wow.
You guys didn't do social distancing then?
We did social distancing, but we didn't do a full lockdown. There was like a week or two when most companies were doing work from home and everything, but we only did that for such a short term and everything went back to normal.
That's awesome. That's so good.
Yeah.
What's it been like for like the people you're living with or like your church community?
Well, people I'm living with, my family, we're mostly back to normal. My dad's still going to work. School was postponed, but I think it's going to be starting back up pretty soon. Churches opened up again like a couple weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
And you have to reserve seats in advance. When you go in, like they check your temperature and like sanitize like your hands. You have to sit like 2 seats away from another person.
Oh, wow.
And I also heard they're doing like drive-in services.
Oh, like a drive-in
matches.
movie.
Yeah, sort of like that. I'm guessing that's what it is. So we're mostly back to normal. But I think that's also going to depend on what's happening with Itaewon, whether more cases are going to pop up or not.
So how are you dealing with the coronavirus situation, like on a personal level?
I try not to go out that much, but I actually was in Itaewon like 3 weeks ago.
What?
Yeah, but it wasn't like I was in clubs or like where they were. But I was in that area, and the government strongly recommended people who had been in Itaewon like during that like 2-3 week time period to go get tested. So I actually got tested last week.
Whoa!
I did. It's negative, so I'm fine.
Dude, imagine if you were positive. This podcast would have taken a different turn.
Plot twist.
It was so scary. Like they were like wearing all these like, it looked like astronaut. Like they look like astronauts. Like, they had like white suits on.
Like a hazmat suit.
Yeah, like they like shoved a cotton swab up my nose. That's how they test you. And then like back of
Like
your mouth
shoved,
as well.
not like...
Yeah. I heard like people cry. Apparently it's supposed to hurt a lot. But it didn't really hurt for me. So I've been out and about, but I've also been developing a lot of hobbies.
Tell us your hobbies.
I made wine at home.
Ooh.
What?
I made makgeolli, which is rice wine. Yeah. I bought a mini oven, so I'm baking and I'm like baking cakes and like, you know. Yeah. And I also bought a keyboard piano, so I'm like playing piano. And I've been relearning guitar.
Wow.
Yeah, and I've been watching a lot of K-dramas, like redeveloping my love for K-dramas.
Is there anything interesting that you're learning through this period of time?
Since I'm usually such an extrovert and I'm like always out seeing friends, but because of this time period, I've had to spend a lot of time just like healing and like staying home. Because I quit my job too, so actually doing nothing. Yeah, hopefully I'll pick up more hobbies. We'll see. I mean, I've been seeing a lot of K-dramas, so maybe I'll put that
You're practicing your Korean.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I'm going to be leaving Korea soon, so who knows? My Korean's going to get really, really bad. I need these dramas.
Do you actually feel like you have to pay attention to what's happening in the U.S. because you're going to be moving there?
A little bit. My fiance mostly updates me, so I don't really keep tabs. I'm really waiting for an email from my grad school explaining what's going to happen in the fall semester. I think it's going to be online classes, but no one knows for sure. I think that's what I'm most cautious about. Yeah, and also like weddings, whether we can have like large crowds for a party. A lot of my friends' weddings got canceled this year, and I heard a lot of weddings are getting canceled even like up till July weddings. A little nervous, but yeah, we're trying to just be positive and just do the like next thing in front of us and see what happens.
Like, that's not something that you picture for your big day.
Yeah. In Korea, I think they're starting to do more weddings. But you see the pictures and everyone's wearing masks. I mean, I guess we have to, but it's just a bummer to see that.
Yeah, I think even now, like, when I see a picture of, like, a group and everyone's wearing a mask, I'm like, oh, whoa. Even to me now, I'm like, oh, that's so weird.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm, like, really relaxed over here, so...
Making wine.
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily feel like stressed or overwhelmed in the situation. It's just kind of like you've adapted pretty easily.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. Like I said, like our period of like the extreme social distancing or something close to a lockdown is really, really short. So I don't feel as trapped. I'm sure, like, I've talked to some friends in the States and they're really taking it hard because they really can't go out.
I think Jenny's also really adaptable, so like whatever comes her way, like she'll be able to adapt to. So I think that kind of helps. Like that's one of her strengths in the Strengths Finder.
What are you most looking forward to after this season is over?
Traveling.
Yeah.
Actually, Adeline and I, we have been doing like annual trips since we graduated. Yeah, and we went to like Taiwan, like she came to Korea, and I was supposed to go to Hong Kong. I really wanted to visit Hong Kong, and like we were planning to go to Vietnam, I think, this year, but not gonna happen. So I think that's like what I'm looking forward to the most.
True.
But
And your wedding.
Yeah.
well, I mean, I don't know if that season's gonna be over though. You know, by then.
Yeah.
I am looking forward to it. Listening, I'm looking forward to it.
Do you have any advice for people, I guess? Like,
I know. I feel like you're handling it so well. I'm like, respect so much to you.
I think it's just because the government dealt with it pretty well, and I'm allowed to go out and about that I'm surviving. But if I were to do a lockdown, I don't know if I would be able to do that. You know?
I think you would. Like, you're already doing such nice stuff, like making wine, baking.
Yeah, that's true. But I still need my like outdoor time and like seeing friends.
Your mentality is really solid. Like being adaptable. Like if that's your strength, what would you tell other people to like do to develop that?
I think if you follow the YouTube algorithm for long enough, then you reach these videos where people are making like stupid things on it. Like you just stare at it for a while and you're like, oh, now I'm gonna do that, you know? Like you can come up with hobbies like that, so I don't know.
So are you telling people to go on YouTube more?
I know. I was like, what's this algorithm that you're
you know, like when you watch YouTube, it just like slowly leads you to all these like videos that
the
you
rabbit
never thought
hole.
about. Yeah. And I think those really encouraged me to buy a mini oven and to bake. And I've been baking so much.
YouTube made you buy an oven.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. They have those like ASMR baking videos. It's so healing. And like you watch like cat videos. I don't know.
Oh.
There's just so much to do, especially with the internet. Like there's so much to do to keep yourself occupied. I spent a lot of money, you know, buying the keyboard piano and like buying a mini oven, but I just sort of see it as my self-care, letting me do what I want.
Yeah.
Just for this time, because it's just hard for everyone. Yeah, if I'm not doing it right now, like when else am I gonna do it?
Good point.
Yeah, so my advice in short is do it.
Well, yeah, thank you so much for coming on our podcast, Jenny.
Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks for
So good to
having
meet
me.
you over Zoom.
Yeah, this was so much fun.
This episode was really cool to me, not just because I was meeting Adeline's friends, but I think it's super interesting. It almost feels like we're ahead in time where all these other places are in like a different time period that we've already experienced. So I think hearing different people's stories, Jenny, Michael, and Sophia, it's almost like that was us 2 months ago. So it was neat to like build a friendship over the phone. Mm-hmm. And this was just cool, I think, to hear those different experiences. And what really stood out to me, I think, was Michael's situation and having to 3 people in a 1-bedroom apartment. Yeah, I think that just kind of blew my mind. I forgot that living situation matters so much. Yeah. Was there anything that stood out to you?
Yeah, I think I really loved how Sophia mentioned being kind to your delivery man, and then the second interview that we had was Michael, and he was actually a delivery man. So I think it was just really cool to see how they're both reflecting on their circumstances and things that come up and how they can live out their values better. Like Michael was so intentional about choosing to get paid to go to the gym, whereas Sophia was like seeing a situation that was not a good situation for herself or other people, but you know, reminding all of us to be mindful of that as well. I was really inspired by how they were all intentionally living out their life even during this time. Like circumstances are obviously not ideal, but they really encouraged me that there are ways that you can still be intentional during these circumstances. Like all of them, I would say, have aspects of their life where they're intentionally choosing to do something. You know, with Sophia, it's like intentionally connecting with people over Zoom or FaceTime, even when she doesn't like that kind of stuff, you know, just to maintain relationships. For Michael, it was, you know, continuing to love his roommates well, even despite all their arguments, you know, choosing to overlook some of their quirks. With Jenny, it's, you know, how can she fill her time with like different hobbies that she's been, you know, wanting to do, and also plan her wedding, even though there's so many unknowns. So I think they were really inspiring in that way and reminded me of the importance of being intentional.
Yeah, I love that. I think I agree. And something different I feel like I want to do from this COVID experience, I think it's just staying in contact. Something I realized is like right now, my grandparents are having to be cautious just because like my grandpa, like he doesn't want to get exposed to, well, nobody wants to be exposed to COVID, but I think just the older you get, taking care of your health, things like that. So they're not able to have people come over. So I feel like their sense of community is probably changing in this time. And I want to be proactive to like reach out. So I think just like texting those people. Something I really loved about Jenny is I feel like I was in a similar place to her where I was between work and everyone was kind of staying at home. So I was like, okay, yeah, I'll pick up like hobbies and try new things. And I think that created a really good sense of like rest and peace for my life. And now that life is returning to normal, like friends are meeting up, and I actually feel like life is getting very busy, especially this week for me. So I think I really want to maintain that and continue that habit of like peace and rest, and not just let it end once life returns to normal, but continue to carry those healthy habits with me.
Yeah, similarly, I would like also, from being inspired from my friends in this episode, I think, you know, living intentionally is so important. I think in the hustle and bustle of Hong Kong, you know, you can get carried away with what's going on with life. So living intentionally is really important to me. I think this whole COVID situation has made me realize that. I'd like to, you know, notice the people around me more and loving them better, I guess, like in the way that they want to be loved. And also learning that, similar to what you're saying, like slowing down doesn't mean that you're not being productive. I think that's always like a thing that people stress, I guess, in the world. It's like, oh, you have to keep going, you have to like move on to the next thing. But I think this whole COVID situation is giving us all a forced reset, which I think only comes probably, hopefully, once in a lifetime.
Oh, true.
You know?
Yes.
So it's nice that we get this opportunity to reset our life and our priorities, and I think, you know, that's something that I'll take away from this.
Yeah, something I think is absolutely crazy is now on a global level, we all have a shared experience. Whoever I meet, whether it's in Hong Kong, in America, even in all those places, I have a situation that I now can relate to that person with, where I think prior to this happening, that would never exist. So I think it does feel, in a sense, we're all like unified in our like in our pain and in our experience, but each experience is different, which is really cool. So I like that is almost like a conversation starter or a place where we can all kind of connect.
Just to wrap this up, I think Audrey and I, you know, when we were deciding about this episode and the topic, I think it's cool. We also wanted to bring a lot of solidarity around this situation, just because, you know, we do have this shared experience with people from all different parts of the world, different walks of life. And so it's like, it can be disheartening, I know, especially in countries where it's still not improving or improving, but slowly. I think it is discouraging, not knowing where it's going to end or when it's going to end. So I think it's just like, we want to encourage you as well. Like, Hong Kong is doing a lot better. And so we've been there, we know how you feel, but, you know, we're here for you as well. And there's lots of people around you who are experiencing similar things as well, that we encourage you to reach out to them.
Yeah, reach out to people you haven't talked to in a while. That has been the most beneficial, I think, life-giving thing. And I think this call was cool to like see Adeline like connect with her friends again, but she's talked to them before too. So Sophia, Michael, Jenny, if you guys are listening, thank you so much for working with us and just making time to record. I know in the midst of trying to figure it out online, it can be hard, or I think even just processing this can be difficult. So we just appreciate you guys doing that with us. We're so thankful for you and all your support.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, each of you guys could have had your own episode because we had such good conversations. We did have to edit it in the interest of time and just pull a few nuggets there, but feel free to reach out to them. I'm sure they'll be happy to hear from you if you want to know more about what they're doing.
Oh yeah, for sure. Thanks so much for listening to this episode. We're so grateful for all of you. We definitely put more work into this with timing and scheduling, but we are so grateful that you have the chance to listen to it. If there's someone you know, maybe who is having a tough time during this COVID experience, you can share this episode with them, and hopefully it will encourage them and give them some cool insight or ideas on what to do.